Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another Three Nations Dementia Working Group webinar. And we're very happy to be here, the first of 2023. This morning's theme is around the impact and the rise of the cost of living and what's been euphemistically called the cost of living crisis. It affects everybody, and new analysis from the Resolution Foundation think tank suggests that our average households across the country will be £2,100 worse off by the end of the next financial year, which is shocking. And the crisis isn't even at a halfway point yet. Among the poorest fifth of families, that's more than 34%, are also saying that their health is affected by the cost of living. It's a very serious issue, and it's something we're going to talk about. We have a panel of experts here to help us, who will introduce themselves shortly. My name is Nigel. I'm the chair of the Three Nations Dementia Working Group, and I'd just like this opportunity to tell you that the webinars rely on you. We need your comments, responses, and questions via the text boxes, which you'll find at the bottom of the screen. If you put your hand up, unfortunately, we won't be able to see you. We can't deal with individual cases, but we can in fact signpost people who've got queries, and we'll try and answer as many questions as we can if they're of a general nature. I'd like to remind you that these webinars are designed, produced, and prepared by people living with dementia. So that's enough from me. And what I'm going to do is prematurely thank all the panelists for giving their time this morning. And I will now hand over to Bronte, who will take charge of this webinar for the next half an hour or so.
Thank you, Nigel. I think we'll start with just introducing the panelists so that everyone knows who we are. I'm Bronte. I've actually been on one of these not too long ago. I'm a senior research evidence officer at the Alzheimer's Society, which means that we support the organisation to become evidence informed. So I've been involved in this work around evidence gathering and sort of leading on the survey part of things. I'm going to hand over to Ivan.
Okay, so my name is Ivan McStay, and I come from Belfast, live in Belfast. And can I just check with Bronte, do you want me to go ahead and give a presentation now, Bronte?
If we just start with your introduction, introduce
okay.
Lauren, Tim, and Martina, and then we'll hand over to you if that's okay.
Thank you. So my name's Ivan. I live in Belfast. I'm a carer. Up until July, I was the carer of my wife, who was living at home, and in July I had to move into care. In the past, I was also the carer for my mother, who died from dementia around about Easter, and she was just 5 days short of her 90th birthday when she died, and she had been suffering for, I guess, about 5 or 6 years. So that's what I do.
Thank you, Ivan. Should we do Lauren, then Tim, and then Martina?
Thank you. My name is Lauren Pates, and I'm the Knowledge Officer for Welfare and Social Care at Alzheimer's Society. So involved in quite a few different things, but all within the area of sort of benefits, paying for care, NHS continued healthcare, that sort of thing. I'll hand over to Tim.
Thanks, Lauren. I'm Tim Beanland. My day job is Head of Knowledge at Alzheimer's Society. I'm here because I've been leading the team across the society developing our cost of living response. As you'll hear, that includes evidencing, thinking about how we can support people, media work and fundraising. So it's quite a broad society-wide approach. I'm going to hand over to Martina.
You're on mute, Martina.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. My name's Martina Davis. I have a dementia diagnosis of PCA, which is posterior cortical atrophy, and that affects the back of the brain, which causes problems with vision, spatial awareness, and there's also memory involved in there as well. I'm also a member of the Three Nations steering group, and I do as much as I possibly can to raise awareness and get involved and be as proactive as I can in anything and in anything that anybody wants me to get involved with. So thank you.
Great. Okay, thank you, everyone. I think we'll start off then, Ivan, if you just want to have a little talk about your experience around the cost of living crisis.
Okay, so I guess what I want to do is, first of all, give the context of my particular situation. So my wife was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease about 4.5 or 5 years ago, although it was clear from maybe 8 or 9 years ago that in fact something wasn't right, and it became more obvious what that was over time. But it took quite a long time for a diagnosis to come forward. My wife lived at home with me until July this year, when it just became too much for me. Unfortunately, I just couldn't cope anymore. I think many people were seeing the signs, but I suppose I was the last to see it. So she moved into care, initially for respite, like so many people, and basically that was that. In terms of the cost of living, I suppose the first impact would be I had to give up work. Although I'm past retirement age, I was still enjoying work, and I found that it was a great release, but it just became impossible. So that was the first thing. Again, explaining the context, I would say that we would have been fairly comfortable pre-COVID in terms of pensions, so my work pension and our state pensions and so on coming in. But then things maybe have taken a change. Still okay, but I live a fairly frugal lifestyle, not very flashy, so maybe that makes a difference. So the obvious things for me are fuel costs. I mean, it would have been second nature for me to jump into the car with my wife and we would go out, and that was really a big part of our day. Recreation would have been going out for a drive, maybe a cup of coffee, something like that. And clearly that became something that it was more expensive, but also there was the feeling that you shouldn't be doing this. You know, you shouldn't be going out and sort of running around. So that was an impact on us. It became more costly. On the plus side, I guess we started walking more, and therefore maybe there's a healthy element to it. My wife initially went into quite a local care home, and that was good for traveling back and forward, but there was no dementia bed available. She was simply in a residential unit. So I had to have her moved. We had her moved over to the other side of town, or the other side of the city. And there's an impact there in terms of travel, time, cost, fuel use, and so on. And that has made a difference. The other thing then that really I think is the effect, and it's unknown at this point. I've said that I would be reasonably comfortable in terms of living costs and so on. I don't use a food bank. I don't need to. I'm able to keep things together pretty well. But for me, there's a time bomb, because there's going to be clearly a rise in the home and the cost of what that is. And I don't know what that is. It's been a fixed cost. To give you, I suppose, to put figures on it, my wife pays £220 a week for her place. The local social services pays the vast majority. And I pay a top-up fee of £75 a week. That's not too bad. That's all manageable. But given the cost of electricity, the cost of oil and gas, it's got to go through the roof. There's no way of avoiding that. I won't know that until April. So I guess my attitude is to just sit tight, see what happens, and we'll deal with it at that point. But I know that it's coming. It's just something that's going to be there, and it's going to make a huge difference. But actually, I can't quantify what that difference will be until we find out, we do the financial assessment and see where we go. So for me, that would be the main worry, because it'll start to impact on everything else. The assessment will be done for my wife's finances. I guess if there's a concern about mine, they'll look at that, but it certainly will have an impact and could have an impact throughout the family. As to what that impact will be, I just don't know. So I think that's really all the points I would want to make at this stage, Bronte.
Yeah, thank you very much for sharing that. I should have really said before you spoke, but Ivan very kindly chatted to us quite recently, sort of when we wanted to find out more about how people in Northern Ireland were impacted by the cost of living crisis. So, and yeah, that theme around anticipation, around you not knowing when the big hit's coming, although you think that it might be, was something that we did get quite a lot from feedback that we had and conversations we had. Okay, thank you. I am going to ask James in the background to put some slides up, I think, and then we'll go on and just myself, Tim and Lauren will chat through some of the stuff that we've been doing from the Alzheimer's Society. And then Martina will share a little bit about her personal experience afterwards. So next slide, please. I'm gonna do it. So this is a timeline that I've created to try and sort of represent what the Alzheimer's Society has been doing in terms of our response to the cost of living crisis. So it was around July and August of last year that we started to bring together key colleagues from across the organisation to think about how we could form a response group. So as I said, put there around September time, it was actually the 20th of September, we did set up a formal cost of living response group. We wanted to sort of answer that question around how is the cost of living going to impact people affected by dementia, and in response, what new services or builds on our current offers should we make as a result? And there was lots of different colleagues from across the organisation within that. So we had people from my own team, media, knowledge, operations, digital fundraising, policy influencing, external partnerships. We had every type of employee from different ends of the spectrum involved in that group, which was actually led by Tim, who we've got today. So what we wanted to do was make sure, the reason we set that first group up was because we were hearing from our staff lots of anticipatory concerns from service users that we support. So for example, people were worried about the rising costs of energy throughout the winter. They were worried about having the cost of food going up, travel. So we wanted to set up that group as quick as we could to try and investigate what that might mean for those people. So what was great is that we initially straight away, because we knew quite a lot of our staff really weren't 100% sure around what advice they could give to service users, Lauren very kindly set up a cost of living checklist for all of our Alzheimer's staff and volunteers to support people affected by dementia. And then we also started a formal evidence gathering process, which was with a bit of a smaller subgroup, part of that task and finish group. So we looked at all sorts of things, so dementia voice, service staff, talking point, and then we also did a huge survey. We commissioned a survey of over 1,000 people affected by dementia across the UK to investigate the impact. And I'll talk a little bit more in the next slide around what we found out. But alongside this, we were also making sure that we were updating our external support offer, so ensuring that we had a cost of living support landing page if anyone wanted to find out anything more. And then from that survey, our media teams did a big regional and national coverage around it to try and highlight the impact specifically on people affected by dementia. Because although we knew from July and August that the cost of living crisis was going to impact everyone, we wanted to know specifically what were the impacts on people affected by dementia and investigate those sort of anecdotal first themes that were coming up from feedback that we were getting. And then we've written a journal paper, so an academic paper, which has done a further analysis on some of those survey findings, have shown that certain men are actually more impacted than women, and certain other aspects which will be released next year. And then there's a benefits partnership going live too, which Tim will talk on a little bit more. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So what we found out was, as we were saying before, we knew anecdotally from around July that people were having growing fears and anxieties around the cost of living crisis and what was it going to mean for themselves and their family. And we were hearing all these different types of stories. So we needed to investigate more specifically. So we sent out that 1,000 person survey in November, and it told us that nearly 1 in 7 people affected by dementia who answered, they are cutting down on their vital social activities. So they're at risk of isolation, greater risk of isolation because of the cost of living crisis. And 1 in 10 is cutting down or stopping their social care. So that's leaving them at real risk of crisis if they're not able to access support that they need. And then, as Ivan touched on, although his fees may not have gone up just yet, people were telling us that on average their fees had risen from about 1,200 a year for residential home care and daycare, and we think that that might have increased more since we did the survey. And this was one really striking piece of information that we got back from the survey. It was that more than half of those that we surveyed who lived on their own at home said that they either don't leave their home at all or go out for less than 1 hour a day because of the cost of living crisis. So that's concerns around fuel, not wanting to turn the heating on and off, all sorts of different reasons, but leaving them at real risk again of isolation and loneliness. And then 45% of people living with dementia who live alone said they never go out. So these statistics that we got back really meant that we needed to act. What we did, I made a little collage in terms of some of the media push that we did around this. So if we go to the next slide. So we knew from around August that care providers were at risk, and that could definitely impact people affected by dementia, with up to over 70% of people living in care homes diagnosed with dementia. But in December, 13th of December, our media team did this big push around the survey and demonstrating how people affected by dementia are specifically impacted using those stats. And then we've done some other pushes around it on Dementia Voice newsletters and other avenues. So that's in terms of what we've done on an evidence gathering scale, and sort of a really light touch on the support that we've been doing and some of the media that we've done. But I'm going to pass over to Tim and Lauren, who have led quite strongly on the support packages that we were offering, and can talk a little bit more in detail around what we're doing and what other organisations are doing.
Thanks, Bronte. Come to the next slide, please, James. Thank you. So as Bronte says, I've been working with across the society with a team from lots of different directorates to take the evidence that Bronte's been talking about and thinking about what does that evidence imply for the additional support that we need to offer people affected by dementia. And having done that, what then are the implications for fundraising? So some of the things I'm going to talk about, and Lauren's going to talk about, are already costed, because they're sort of adjustments to our current offer, and some of them are new, and therefore we're having to fundraise additional money to support those. So just to summarise what our support looks like for cost of living, we often think about our support in this sort of pyramid way, and what that means is that at the bottom of that pyramid is what we would think about as our universal or national offer. That's things like the website, where people can self-serve and gather information and be signposted on to other places. That's got massive reach, but it's obviously not everybody is able to access that, and it's got a relatively shallow intervention, if you like. But that's the universal offer. If people need more tailored support, then we're looking at either a phone call or working with our community dementia advisors in that local service. And I'll mention a little bit about some of the work there, and Lauren will as well, about how we've supported our frontline staff to offer more tailored advice to people about cost of living. And then for people really at the greatest need, we're at the top of the pyramid. We're talking about referrals to things like food banks and warm places, which we'll also touch on. But this model we use quite a lot. It's really about the depth of intervention, meeting people's needs and abilities, and offering services which are appropriate to them. I should say that the evidence gathering that Bronte's touched on is continuous. So we've got continuous phases of evidence gathering, and as we learn more about what people's needs are, we're then folding these in to develop our support offer. So that's a summary of support. I'm actually going to hand over to Lauren now, who's going to touch on a couple of things in that support pyramid. So if James can play the next slide, and then Lauren can come in to talk to those two. Thanks.
Thank you, Tim.
So James, next slide, James, then for Lauren, thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, so what we wanted to do initially is just acknowledge that Alzheimer's Society isn't always the best place to offer all of the advice on cost of living. If you put that term into Google, there's going to be pages and pages and pages of information. And it's not our area of expertise to start telling people when to switch suppliers or, you know, which household items are the best to have to reduce bills. That's not our area. So we wanted to focus on what is our area of expertise with this. And our area of expertise has been informed over the years by people affected by dementia. And we know the difficulties they can face due to the diagnosis, the problems they can have with the health and social care system, the flaws that are already there, and also those financial implications that they can have, either due to having a diagnosis or caring for someone who has one. So we knew that those existing problems were there and that the cost of living crisis was just going to exacerbate that. So when we looked at putting some information out there, we wanted to include on this self-service hub lots of the general information that people do need to know. So things like the cost of living payments or how to make your home as energy efficient as possible. We needed people to be able to come to us because they were already looking and know where to go for that. But we also wanted to tailor the information that we had on there because, as I've said, if we put absolutely everything around cost of living on our website, it would just completely overwhelm people. So we tailored it to the information that we think people affected by dementia would most need to know. So we could be specific with some of that as well. So things like on the cost of living pages and on the blog that accompanied it, we can talk about why someone over state pension age may still financially benefit from claiming carers allowance. And we can talk about what happens in the financial assessment to allow for some of those additional household costs if they're receiving care. So little things like that, or that we had the knowledge already from working in this field and being an expert in that we think people needed to know. And as you can see from the slide, we've had 7,700 views on these pages so far. But what we also include on there is information on how to contact us if we need a little bit more. So for a lot of people, this will be sufficient. There's links and signposts to where to get more detailed information. And that will be enough, but some people may need a little bit of help to go through it and to talk through things in a little bit more detail, something a bit more personalised. So as Tim said, we had to make sure that our staff and volunteers had access to information to help people who were contacting us with worries and concerns. You can just go to the next slide, James. So we internally had a 10-point cost of living checklist, covering lots of different things. But again, from our knowledge of the problems that we know people affected by dementia face, that we knew were going to get worse. And obviously the survey later confirmed that. So lots of different information on there about claiming benefits and maximising income, because we know that a lot of people don't claim the benefits they're entitled to. And with the financial climate, now might be the time that they need to look at doing that. So we wanted to be able to give them that information. But also acknowledging other things that for people affected by dementia may not come as easy. So in newspapers and online, there's lots of information about being as energy efficient as possible. But some of that doesn't come as easy to someone with a diagnosis. So it's not always a case of just remembering to turn the taps off or turn the lights off. You know, they may have memory problems or, you know, visual perception problems or things like that that make that advice not as easy to implement. So in the cost of living checklist, we give a bit more information and a few more creative solutions so that staff can talk through that with people who do ring up with those concerns. And similarly, you know, in the checklist, we talk about ensuring that people are looking after their mental well-being. It is quite draining constantly looking at the news and seeing all this information. A few people have mentioned, like Ivan, you just don't know what's coming, when it's coming, and you know, when you're going to get that big hit. And it's anxiety inducing for a lot of people, but especially, as I've said, it's exacerbated if you're someone with a diagnosis or you're a carer for someone, because the problems were already there and it's just making it much worse. So on the checklist, we also include information on things like that. So hopefully with that external offer and the information that people can access, and then also the invitation to contact us and have more personalised information on those things, we're leaving people more informed of what their situation is. We may be able to even offer some solutions or flag up some things that they weren't aware of that may help them in this sort of difficult financial climate. Thank you.
Thanks, Lauren. James, can we have the next slide for me, please? Thank you. So Lauren touched on this, but I'm just going to cover a couple of elements of our support offer, which are slightly different because they are things that we're not currently doing at scale, certainly, and that involve partnerships, which is very much a feature of our new way of working. We're going to be working a lot more closely with other organisations. So as Lauren touched on, it's quite well known that people with dementia, all the evidence suggests people affected by dementia, they don't claim all the entitlements, the benefits, the welfare benefits. They don't claim what they're entitled to. That's probably a mixture of not being aware of them, about stigma, of maybe not wanting to claim, or to be honest, the forms and the process can be complicated, and when people have started and just given up. It's almost as if the system is designed to deter people from applying. So what we've realised is that a really positive thing for people at the moment would be to be able to claim benefits that they're entitled to, but they're not accessing. And the way that we're proposing to do this is through a partnership with someone like Citizens Advice. So our current dementia advisors are able to give basic information about claiming benefits, but they're not regulated to provide benefits advice or to help people fill in forms and things like that. So the way this would work is people would contact us through our normal services, and we would then, if somebody were eligible and we think they would benefit from a referral, we would refer them to Citizens Advice, who would do a full benefits check, and if appropriate, they would work with the person, support them, fill in forms, possibly attend appeals if the benefit wasn't accepted. And also to check with DWP that the payments were going in. Sorry about the dog in the background. She wants to come and be part of the webinar, I'm afraid. It says that we will take referrals from people anywhere in England and Wales. That's because Citizens Advice don't operate in Northern Ireland. But Ivan, rest assured, we'll have a separate partnership with a separate organisation in Northern Ireland so that service users based there are not disadvantaged because of Citizens Advice's geographical spread. So the details of all this are still being worked up. But if you see external communications from us in the next couple of months, either through media or through fundraising, we're having a big push to raise money for this, because in partnering up with Citizens Advice, we're subcontracting dedicated staff to be in the Citizens Advice office in Birmingham, who will pick up the phone and say, Alzheimer's Society Benefits Service. And so they are people that we've paid to have on an extended service offer for people. We'll be able to monitor how this goes. We will see how much money people are getting that they were entitled to but not claiming, and we'll obviously know how many people it's reaching. So this is quite an exciting new venture for us. James, if I can have my final slide. Again, this is also in the partnership space. So this is for people, well, originally you might have thought people who are in the direst straits at the top of that pyramid, but when you hear about people like nurses having to go to food banks to get by, I think we realise how widespread and deep the cost of living crisis is. Again, of course, this is an area a bit like benefits where there are issues of stigma and awareness, and so it's very sensitive. We have arranged in discussions with Trussell Trust for people. So we've got the ability now to refer our service users into local food banks, Trussell Trust food banks. They have an online referral system. So if a service user is in touch with us, we can refer them into the Trussell Trust, and they will get temporary support. It's not a long-term solution, food bank support. It's a temporary support. To be honest, we're still building up the picture here in terms of what the demand is. We've got local people in local teams, because all of the food banks for Trussell Trust are very federated and work locally. We're still understanding what the demand is. We've got the mechanisms that we can refer people in. but the numbers at the moment just look relatively small, and we're exploring why that is. But we've certainly got this as an option in our kind of support portfolio, that if people come to us or we're able to identify that they would benefit from this, we can refer. So this is most likely, we've had stories of dementia support workers going into people's homes to support families and just realising from what people have maybe got or not got in their cupboard or their fridge and how they're living, that they would be eligible for this. And so often I can imagine there would need to be an element of gentle nudging to say to people, look, this is an okay thing for you to do, because I can imagine it's a big deal to have to realise that you're in that position. I'm going to stop, and I think the next slide is an ask for questions. Bronte, did you want Martina to come in before questions, and then we'll take the questions after she's spoken?
Yeah, if we, I was just going to say thank you to Lauren and Tim for that. It's really helpful to talk through the support that's gone on. And as you said, Tim, we are continuing to monitor what the impact is. So we're having continuing consultations, continuing conversations with our service staff around local areas and what the demand is. But yes, I think we should hear from Martina now before we take any questions. And if you do have any questions, you can put them in the question and answer bit in the meantime. I don't know if Martina's frozen.
Hi, can you hear me, guys?
Yeah.
My internet keeps dropping in and out.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you very much for the invitation to speak today. I've kind of, my little piece actually is about the hidden aspects of the cost of living. And you've already touched on one of them, which is isolation. Now, before I go into that, food prices actually increased between September 21 and September 22 by 14.5%, reaching an all-time high of 16.40% in November 2022. Milk alone went up in August by 16.2% from August to August 2020, from August 2021. Now, the hidden aspect of the cost of living, I'm finding, is quite a dark one. And although the speakers from the society have actually already touched on isolation, the isolation of not being able to get out because you haven't got a bus fare, you haven't got a train fare, you can't get out in the car, maybe you no longer have a license. You're losing your companions because you can't afford to keep them. You've had a dog, maybe.
We just missed that last bit there from you, Martina.
I know of a lady who is quite elderly. She's just had a dementia diagnosis. She's incredibly anxious, and her life and soul is her dog, Lizzie. And she is giving up food to feed the dog. Tins of soup that used to be 50p, and we're talking about branded soup, is now £1.75 a tin. People are using their PIP allowances and their attendance allowances to survive. And I use the word survive, and in many cases are not even doing that. The advisors out in the field are incredibly important, and they will be bound and tied by certain things, but equally their job through this cost of living crisis has become incredibly harder because of all the other things they're having to look out for, and it's based on the cost of living crisis. People can't afford to go out and have a cup of tea and a piece of cake, which means, as your research shows, is it 45% of people living on their own don't go out anymore? You know, how is that affecting their mental health? They can't get appointments for GPs because they've got dementia. And what can we do about it? So there is quite a dark side to the cost of living crisis for people with dementia. I don't know where it's going to end. I don't even think we're scratching the surface of it at the moment. I truly believe that. And the increase, I live in Cumbria, the increase in food banks up here and the fall in food that's going into them is actually quite scary. It's very, very scary. So the facts and figures are absolutely great, but there's also that side. How do we tackle that underneath dark side? And the other thing to remember, of course, personally for me, my dementia advisor is incredibly important, because accessing websites and too much information overload can be quite difficult. It actually depends on my day. And of course, then it's, do you remember to do it? Do you remember to switch the lights off? Do you remember to turn the heating on? So there's a lot of underlying things that also need to be tackled, but how we do it and how we get other people to listen, I think thereby lies a conundrum. And apologies for my dreadful internet. It's called being very, very rural. Thank you very much for listening.
No, it's no worries. You managed to stay on quite clearly, actually. So thank you. Thank you for sharing your experience there. Yeah, some of the things that we also have heard quite a lot in some of the feedback that we've had recently is around that guilt too, and shame around going out and seeing people if it means extra costs of fuel and that sort of thing. So yeah, not some great things that we're starting to hear. So we've got something in the chat Nigel's just put down. Question from a person. I'm just reading. Nigel, would you prefer if I just read as I go here? Tim, did you say you wanted to come in?
I can address the question from Melvin Brooks, if you like, which was in the chat, and then maybe
Yes,
you could address the question, and maybe Laura might have a bit of thought about that, if that's okay. So Melvin, thanks for your question. You were asking why the society doesn't provide benefits advice, which is a perfectly legitimate and good question, of course. So just to be clear, this is the frontline members of staff of the society will provide benefits information, so they will raise awareness of what benefits people affected by dementia are entitled to. But we're not able at the moment to provide tailored benefits advice, because that's a sort of regulated activity. It's obviously different from things like independent financial advice, but it's like that in the sense that you need to be regulated to offer it. That's simply because the implications of getting it wrong, given if somebody were claiming a benefit and it was they could claim for months and months, if they were either claiming it and were not entitled or were entitled and didn't get it, you can see the implications of that would be large financially. So what we've done is we've made the decision at the moment to offer this service in partnership through someone like Citizens Advice. And I think that's a reflection that as Alzheimer's Society, we don't need to do everything, but we do need to look at people's needs. And so by partnering up and working closely with someone like Citizens Advice, we can rely on their specialty, because they do have accredited benefits advisors who maintain their training and accreditation and are able to offer that service in a way that we're not. Whether we will actually do benefits advice ourselves at some stage in the future, I would never say never. I think this is a step in that direction. But at the moment, we've made the decision to grow reach through partnership rather than through developing those skills in-house. So we'll see how that partnership goes, and we'll take it from there. But thanks for your question.
thank you, Tim. I know that just in follow-up to that, Julia, who's one of our Alzheimer's Society dementia support workers, has really said that she's really pleased that that partnership will be going live. And she's asked if there's a rough start date for when they might hear more about that.
Yes, thanks. Because it's a partnership, we've got to get contracts through legal, and there's quite a lot of paperwork and stuff to do. So it's going to be probably March, April before that takes off. So it'll be hopefully when the worst of the winter weather's gone, but we will still sadly see the increase in costs coming in April. So, and obviously people's needs in other areas are still, the fuel costs are not going down anytime soon. So there will still be huge demand for it. There's a 2-year partnership from, we think about March, April time.
There's a question here from Maxine Linnell. And she's saying, hello, I was diagnosed with early Alzheimer's in September, and she has to give up working and for weeks to find out and apply for benefits. And she's asking, the question is, if and how the Alzheimer's Society engages with government and other organisations with these difficulties and anomalies. She's on about a rail card and getting the PIP rushed through and all stuff like that. I'm not sure, Maxine, that that's something that is easily done, because the PIP formula is, for anybody who's done it, is absolutely horrendous, and it's getting bigger now. Initial PIP things are up to 82 pages of information. But Maxine, somebody at the Alzheimer's Society would help you. If contact them directly and give you the information, that's particularly on the rail card.
I would. Sian Blackham's put her details in the chat, so reach out to Sian in the first instance, and we can put you in touch with, for example, people in our influencing team. There's nothing like a good case story to take to government and say, look, this isn't working. Here's someone that can explain how bad things are. That's the way we use our levers to get change in a lot of these areas. So Sian Blackham's details are in the chat, and I'll just put them in. If you want to go to Sian in the first instance, that would be helpful.
There is so many links in there for people where they can go and get the equipment. But there was a question I put. I'm going to talk in a bit about the impact of cost of living crisis on food banks, as I'm a trustee for a food bank, and I volunteer there twice a week, so I see it firsthand. But is there support to help people who may need to run medical equipment at home as part of their treatment? For example, CPAP machines, which are needed due to obstructions, sleep apnea, ventilators, home dialysis, hoists, electric wheelchairs, scooters, which all add to the energy costs. Yeah, I mean, I've got a few stories about that. I can tell you that people are choosing not to run these things because they can't afford to. We have strong evidence that the Trussell Trust has strong evidence that the first thing to go when these things come. I mean, for instance, it's not unusual for me to talk to somebody who comes into the food bank and they tell me they go to bed every day at 3 o'clock to stay warm. That they only want beans and soup. I have a couple, one who's got dementia, one who's been supported by their carer, who tell me all they want is bread and gravy mix. Now, this is Britain in 2023. I mean, just what's going on. When I started doing food bank, I did it through my church, and when we started the food bank, so 8 years ago now, it was people living with chaotic lifestyles. They were general, people who just either fell through the benefits trap. And slowly but surely that's changing. And over the last 4 years, last 2 years, in fact, we've seen a remarkable change. Nurses use the bank. Firefighters use the bank. Ambulance drivers use the bank. Policemen. Now, I just want you to think about that. Policemen go into a food bank. How dangerous is that? And we have seen a steady growth in the people that come to us. And to put a bit, in 2014, the Trussell Trust reckoned in England, there were 500,000 food banks. There's now 1,093,000. That's their figures. In Northern Ireland, there were only just under 10,000, and now there are 35,000. In Scotland, there was 82. 82,000, and now there are 126. And in my country, Cymru, Wales, there were 57,000, and now there's 82,000. The danger is that the support we get is mostly from the big supermarkets. It's got to be said. They're marvelous, because the public drop-in thing is, well, people just can't afford to do it. But the danger is what happens if we run out of food. We come close to running out of parcels a few times. Now, the Trussell Trust tell you that about 2.5% of all households will or have used a food bank at some point during 2023, and we could 2022, and we continue to 2023. So this food insecurity is affecting people at all levels. It's not good for your health, and it's not good for your social well-being, because even though one idiot politician once said he thought food banks were uplifting because it showed the grace of people to others. I mean, I won't name him, but his name ends with Mog, and it's this feeling of reluctance. They're having they go for something they haven't earned. People don't reach out for help, and I'm so pleased to see, Tim, that the society have done this by drawing a partnership with Citizens Advice, because they're the kind of experts in this field, and a partnership with Trussell Trust. Trussell Trust shake with rage every day. I know this because we're part of it, you know. And when people come to us and tell us that it's no good giving them food to cook because they can't afford to put the heating on, and you question 75-year-old people living on soup and beans. You know, what are the short and long-term health impacts for that? And 1 in 10 children going to bed hungry. What are the health impacts on that?
Yeah, I was just going to say, on that point that you mentioned, Nigel, at the beginning around those extra costs for people living with dementia because they have to run medical equipment. That's something that we were really conscious of at the very beginning of our investigation, because we knew that that would be one of the things that might mean people affected by dementia could be impacted in different ways, or impacted more by the cost of living crisis. So I know, Lauren, I think you wanted to come in on that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I mean, there's not some specific fund or anything like that we can signpost to, but again, from the start, it's about ensuring that people are claiming everything that they can. So every little bit of money is so important, and you might think, oh, it's not worth claiming something like pension credit or something like that because it'll only actually top me up £2 more than I have already, but that can passport to a lot of other financial help. So help with council tax, full housing benefit, help with NHS costs. So all those things can add up to help with that. Same with claiming sort of help with council tax through the severe mental impairment exemption. It's all getting a little bit more money in the pot. Now, if you are still, and just one thing to add, someone mentioned about benefits not going up enough. I completely agree. What has been announced in November is they are going to go up 10.1% in line with inflation. So that is a little bit more promising than it has been previously. So I'm not saying it's anywhere near enough, but just to say that is a little bit more promising than it has been. But yeah, claiming everything you're entitled to, especially any means tested benefits, but also those disability benefits. So things like attendance allowance if you overstate pension age, or personal independence payment if you're under state pension age. They're there to help soak up some of those disability related costs. And I appreciate it's not always going to be enough. If you are still struggling to run that sort of assistive technology or equipment, there's two big things I would flag up. The local authorities, councils, have been given money through the government to spend as they wish on their own priorities in their area. So if you are struggling with something that's as important as running medical equipment, contact your local council. They have discretionary funds available, and they may be able to help you with some of those costs. So please do that. Another thing, if you have an existing social care package that you're getting funding help for through the local authority, they have to allow you to keep enough of your money to run that disability related cost. So they can't say, we're going to pay this amount and you're going to pay the rest of this because we think you can afford to pay that with your home care package. They have to adjust it for any disability related costs that you have that they won't be meeting the need of. And that can include lots of different things, including additional water costs. So, if you've got additional water bills because of your disability, it even says in the statutory guidance, it could include heating costs if they're increased because of your disability, and also things like additional electricity bills if you're running equipment. If they're not meeting the need that equipment is running, and there's nowhere else that can meet that need, they have to allow for that in the financial assessment for your home care. So do ensure that the local authority know. So the three big things would be claim all the benefits you can, whether they're means tested or disability. Contact your local council if you're still struggling, because there are discretionary funds available. And also make sure if you've got a social care package, the local authority know you have those additional costs, because they have to allow for those and they will have a policy on that. Thank you.
I think it's fair to mention, it's worth mentioning as well that the warm hubs that local authorities are starting to run, where people go and sit. I mean, it's terrible we're talking about this, but it's out there. And you can go to your local authority and ask if the cost of going to the warm hubs, blanks are the same as you by going to the warm hubs. You can ask for some help with transport costs. I know my local authority does that, but we're spread out. In Wales, we're all over the shop. And do you think that one of the long-term effects of where we are now is going to have implications on people's health in the future? Anybody having a go at that?
I think Bronte touched on this. I think there are some parallels here with coronavirus. So we know during the pandemic that people were isolated and staying at home for some medical reasons, mostly, but in some cases not. And that we saw what was medically called deconditioning, but essentially it was people getting worse, their dementia progressing more quickly, or their mental health taking a hit because they weren't engaging with activities, either social or physical. And so from the survey we've seen, and Ian Ivan's touched on this, if people are staying in more, then it will have an impact on their well-being in lots of different ways. So that's why we would encourage people, if someone like Ivan, we encourage people to claim the benefits they're entitled to and use that to get out and about and stay active, and don't put yourself at risk of deteriorating. I'm not sure, Bronte, whether we'll have any data on that, but certainly we see parallels with the pandemic in terms of the impact of this on people's well-being, don't we?
Yep, Ivan.
Yeah, and I think the isolation has come up again and again, and it's a big issue. And I would simply encourage people to use any resources that are available. We've had a lot of Zoom meetings, which aren't as satisfactory as meeting face-to-face, but they're good as an introduction. It gets you an introduction to meet people. You hear about more things that are going on, and you're maybe able to access some. Some you can't access because the time doesn't suit, you can't afford to go, whatever it happens to be, but there may be some that you can. And it's really important to keep going, to have that idea that I'm going to keep trying here. That sort of positive attitude, which is easy to talk about, but not easy to bring on board all the time. But if you can do, it can really be helpful. Just having the initial contact with someone, and who knows where it leads. So I think that is very important, because the isolation it's an absolute killer. I'm sure it actually is a killer for a lot of people. So therefore, it's important to try and work at that very hard.
100%. And I think just to add on to that, as Tim said, from the impact of the pandemic, we saw how badly people were impacted by the isolation specifically. So that's some of the things that we're really keen to keep on top of in terms of what we're looking at and what support we're offering. And I think that's a really good point, Ivan, around thinking again about the Zoom and the online options. So what are the alternatives if you feel like you can't get out? So yeah, I don't know if anyone else, Tim?
I was just going to say, I didn't mention it, but our companion call service is still running, and we're trying to expand that a little bit. And that, if people are not familiar, that's where we partner up a volunteer with a person affected by dementia, and there are regular phone calls. The volunteers actually say that they find those hugely valuable and enjoy them. I'm sure the people receiving them do, so it's a two-way benefit, if you like. But yeah, companion calls are something that are part of our offer. To try and combat isolation, people who may be at home or may need to be.
Yeah, and just if you are struggling or you know anyone that is struggling, please do use the support pages, reach out to our support line, get in contact with someone, because as we're saying, the worst thing to do is just to stay at home and not leave the house all day or speak to anyone about it. So yeah.
Yeah, can I just say we're coming up to shutting down time. Can I thank you all? Some of the comments in the chat boxes is very complimentary, especially some comments for Lauren here. You know, such trusted expert like Lauren, such valuable information, and I think we all mirror that. Can I just also reassure people who may be reluctant to visit food banks? There is no judgment. There, for the grace of God, go I. It's, you know, poverty is, for some people, is just a matter of circumstance. So we're very supportive, or we try to be. Unfortunately, we can't make it a pleasant experience because, you know, it isn't, because nobody likes that kind of thing. But nevertheless, it's what happens. I'm going to finish on a positive note. I think that the one thing that shows this morning's webinar has shown, there's a huge amount of help out there for people, and probably people who haven't realised up to now how much help there has been. We'll see that when we feed it back in the recordings on the website. But if you're in trouble, don't struggle. You know, go to somebody and ask for help. There's no judgment in this. You know, and we're all one paycheck away from it, aren't we? Really, you know, thinking about it, that's the latest thing. So can I thank you all for this, for today, for this morning's webinar. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Martina. Thank you, Bronte. Thank you, Lawrence. Thank you, Ivan. It's been great, and there's been a great human aspect to it as well. So if I can ask all the participants to log off now, we will just have a little debrief for 5 minutes, and we'll be with you in a fortnight's time. I don't know what the subject of the webinar is. Have you put it in? Oh yes, assistive technology. Hints and tips. There you go. So have a good day, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye now.